In the waning days before I had to rapidly start coming to grips with being a generally useful adult, I was a useless teenager. One weekend night, in between intoxication and free mulligans to try and find some lands in my deck this time, guys, I promise, I got introduced to Vulfpeck. It was the only thing I would talk about for the next few months. Being in a garage band, especially as a drummer trying to eternally tune out the internal urge to play dumb fills and learn just how to hold a beat for once, which I did eventually get pretty decent at, the experience slammed open a door of musicianship previously unfamiliar to me. Before then, funk was a concept just like a groove or a vibe. Something was funky. But when you're a kid playing in a rhythm section and you hear Deantown for the first time, you suddenly walk around acting like the funk has been your whole life. It isn't, though. You're just coming to realize that there's this large world of predominantly black music that you've never experienced yet as a white teenager in the suburbs. Without delving too far into that conversation that I end up inputting several feet into my mouth, there is a funk. And as such, there's a concept of faking the funk. Vulfpeck, historically, do not fake the funk. They don't on their newest album, Clarity of Cal, either. This is not a setup for a negative review or anything. I just view Vulfpeck as a pretty unique anomaly as far as pop acts to garner acclaim, popularity, and respect in recent memory go. The band has always paid tribute to the Wrecking Crew with the conceptualization of the band's mythos, their origin, essentially just being based on the Wrecking Crew. And this music lifer mentality combined with everyone involved just being absurdly, disgustingly proficient musicians technically has led to this really singular space they inhabit. And I really do mean they're just disgusting musicians. You'll be hard-pressed to find a bass guitar-centric organization that hasn't showered Joe Dart with awards, and for good reason. Reviewing a Vulfpeck album feels a bit redundant to anyone who's been tapped in, because Clarity of Cal is, at its core, a Vulfpeck album. Little songwriter and pop music aficionado nuances are everywhere to be found and geeked over, just like on any of their previous material. But there are some interesting wrinkles both in this time period and in the record itself that make Cal a notable release this year. The group, and particularly group leader Jack Stratton's humor, would show itself more and more frequently as the band started to take off.
In 2014, funk band Vulfpeck capitalized on a Spotify loophole, collecting $20 grand in royalties by asking users to stream its completely silent album, Sleepify, on repeat while they slept. The band later used the money to fund an admission-free tour for their fans before Spotify pulled the album. Joining us with more on that ahead of the IPO is the artist behind Sleepify, Vulfpeck's leader, Jack Stratton. Jack, it's good to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Let's rock.
How many airings total have you gotten, or did you get?
5 million, and it was removed under the terms violation that the artist shan't make money. That term.
You can see this particularly in an early favorite of mine, a structurally simple but decadent and groovy number called Barbara. There's no other version to listen to, in my opinion, than the video-only version that's on YouTube. It is put over the top by a cut of early Steve Jobs interview footage. Jobs says, "Let me do this again." Takes a sip of water, clears his throat, the grunt is echoed like crazy, then the ever-versatile Theo Katzman on that ride cymbal just lays down one of the sweetest fucking beats I have ever heard in my life.
I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the condor one came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else. And humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for Crown of Creation. And, but somebody there.
I point this out for two reasons. First reason is I just want to geek about it. I just love this band. Every time I remember the time period in my life that I first heard about them, I go just think about that band and I go, oh, maybe it was just a phase. Maybe I'm not going to be as huge into them if I turn on some of their newer shit. Then I go listen to them again and I think, no, this band is fantastic. The second reason is a few Vulfpeck adjacent acts have risen to at least a level of prominence where I've heard about them in the last few years, and none of them are anywhere near as good. Maybe if it were more marketable and easily manufactured, we'd be hearing more King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard knockoffs everywhere. But the styles of Vulfpeck are, I guess, desirable to imitate because they're just universally appealing, unless you've got negative groove. Instead, time has proven both of these acts to be pretty singular, pop chart friendly, but not entirely acts that have enveloped this pseudo jam band space of really dedicated devotees and bootleggers. However, when it comes to Vulfpeck, it's not for a lack of trying. Consider this a write-up of Lawrence as well, the brother-sister duo of musician band leaders that, in my waning days of TikTok usage, became the hipster music talk punching bag of the week for a little bit there. Their acoustic-ish, their words not mine, performance of their song What You Want even got some critical whipping from none other than the internet's busiest music nerd. And no, I'm not going to, but actually, this song, or reappraise it or whatever, it's bad. It's a bad song. It was pegged immediately, accurately, and rather hilariously as back-to-school commercial music. People did really smarmy voiceovers and stuff, just like voice actors and actresses doing the Target commercial voice, talking about the hot new deals on dorm room essentials and stuff, and it was really funny. I'm not gonna act like it wasn't hilarious, because it was really funny.
From pumpkin spice treats to warm blankets, there's something to embrace the season for everyone. Not a member yet? No problem. Sign up for free and unlock amazing deals instantly.
When you've seen it before, your brain doesn't even want to watch the first 16 seconds of it. The YouTube timeline recommendations for what's the most replayed, it knows what you're here for. It's singer Gracie Lawrence's opening long, loud note. It's technically proficient, really technically impressive, but it sounds awful. It's hard to place why. I mean, I think I might know why. It's because it's the moment in the reality TV show singing competition where the crowd noise gets piped in and cuts to all the judges' expressions going, it's the moment where Adam Levine hits the button. There's a reason those shows rarely produce lasting talent as far as pop music goes. It's because being a technically proficient singer doesn't make you a good singer. It means you're technically proficient, but it doesn't mean anybody would want to listen to you. Just gonna let this hang. Then, of course, there's the big looming question about their presence on everybody's phone screen all of a sudden, which for most people that question would be, how did this get onto my phone screen? The answer to which is not always, but increasingly usually, money. Or at least, that's the allegation. Yes, friends, it's time for another collective internet gang tackle on the industry plant. You know what, this was going to be just another review for my Album of the Year page of that new Vulfpeck record, but buckle up, kids. It's time to talk about industry plants.
So what is an industry plant? It's really hard to talk with this thing on my head. I can't use all of my mouth. So what is an industry plant? How do we at least loosely define an industry plant as some part of a really jank theoretical framework for the purposes of analyzing a few alleged industry plants of recent memory? Well, if you're unfamiliar with the term entirely, I would describe it as highly analogous to a term that you may have heard recently, as it's sort of escaped its own little bubble of whatever corner of the internet it was on and got into some more mainstream discussions. That term that it's analogous to is Nepo baby. That term was all over the place for a little bit, like a hot moment, and I don't know, some point in the last 2 fucking years. Time's an illusion recently, but it was a term that traveled just kind of like everywhere, except music, really, because the music industry kind of already had a term for it. Uniquely, pop music has numerous identifiable and honestly pretty hard to argue examples of industry plants that aren't simply Nepo babies. Industry plant as a term, I think, explicitly includes a lot more of a sort of subconscious feeling when talking about a Nepo baby. This feeling is that their place in the grander scheme of pop music was essentially chosen for them, usually by somebody who's financially motivated, and as such carries a real sort of negative connotation about a person's affinity for their craft. In music, this usually takes the form of an argument of authenticity. As we'll see a bit later, there's some genres where this just straight up does not fly. However, it's not unique to one genre, and it's not unique to one career archetype. There are pop industry plants, there are rock industry plants, there are hip-hop industry plants, there are old industry plants, there are new industry plants, and so on. I already know when I'm editing, I'm going to throw up pictures of a couple of, alleged industry plants of all of those specifications, and if you're a fan of any of them, it might just be like an insult. I'm not trying to call any of those people industry plants. I'm just highlighting that if you saw that and got upset, then you understand why this discussion has been happening pretty much everywhere in music for a long time. But we've got to ask one question. Does any of this shit matter? Well, in my opinion, yes, because collectively, we've made it matter. Poptimism, and its consequences, has cemented that pop music is, in fact, widely regarded as an art form in its own right. But Poptimism's long-standing place as the guiding mantra of pop music discussion in the 21st century, be it music reviews or generally any space where pop music is given some sort of critical analysis, it's inevitably birthed a counter-Poptimist mindset amongst some people. If you don't know what Poptimism is, here's the insanely brief rundown. The beginning of the internet's grip on popular music coincided rather symmetrically with one of the most sort of large-scale rejections of a trend in pop music that we had seen to that point. This was the TRLification of pop music and the boy band wars, and the backlash to this took many forms. I don't want to act like this was just like widely hated and that the average person that you'd go up to on the street would tell you about how much the Backstreet Boys sucked, like they told you about burning disco records. But there was a pretty large, unignorable swath of, young boys who just did not want anything to do with that shit because it was for girls, man. Or something like that, I don't know. This took the form in the music industry of, an exploitative, financially lucrative nu metal movement, and a couple of the bands that would now be sort of rediscovered 20 years later and reappraised were just, huge names at this point. Your Limp Bizkits, your System of a Down, I mean, they had bigger things to be rallying against than pop music. And we're a fucking great band, too. But anyway, this sort of takes place simultaneously with the advent of things like Napster and file sharing in the early days of social media on the internet. And as you might guess, the kids that were on the internet and really sort of trying to take a critical look at music weren't particularly interested in deconstructing the merits of Backstreet's Back. As much of a fucking banger as that song is. The biggest stuff was unavoidable and just continues to be relentlessly popular. But amongst this set of critics on the internet, Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake, they're not artistes, they were pop stars, manufactured in a lab or a house of mouse or whatever. They were phonies and fakes who needed to run back to their mansions. The most popular and most notable to that point music writing institution was still Rolling Stone, and that magazine was hated by pop kids and indie kids in equal measure. They were so fixated on worshipping the 60s and 70s eras of dad rock, and it seemed like every other day they had a new list of the top 100 guitarists of all time, where the top spots are all reserved for really obvious choices like Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton or something, but they'd also dedicate, space to it to fuckers like Jimmy Page and Joe Perry, and have the obligatory B.B. King inclusion somewhere in there. The force that brought about Poptimism is the force that got that magazine to just publish it like that every day, to, the magazine that gives to Taylor Swift a 5 out of 5 for waking up in the morning. Crucially, it's also the force that led hip, new, young, edgy, new music criticism vanguards like Pitchfork to stop waxing poetic about Kid A and give a little more space to, like, Morgan Wallen or something like that, you know what I mean? Of course, that's not, A to B, but, you'll find the same amount of wall space for Lady Gaga as you will for Black Midi. Just not something that would have happened in the late 90s or early 2000s. The merits of Poptimism can be argued by people who aren't me right now. Have fun in the comments. Personally, I think it was a necessary shift in mindset, although we've probably overcorrected a bit. Although, I don't know. An album like Brat, meaning a ton to people, and clearly with a lot more going on under the hood, and that album's wild success couldn't have even been a dream without music writers years and years ago giving some credence to dance pop. And like I alluded to before, it of course stands to reason that a lot of those really huge mass market pop songs of the early 2000s they're just bangers. Still, I'd personally be happy to see some more challenging music get the spotlight from some of these rags and whatever cultural influence they hold in the post-social media era. This all culminates in an argument long bickered over through the history of pop music since the Fab Four. How much reverence should pop music be given, critically? Can we truly call pop music art? Or is it disposable? If it is art, then why? Well, to answer the first one, yes, of course it's art. I remember 2 albums that rock-centric critics bring up a lot to get that point across. One of this picture of 4 dudes looking weird with mop tops on their head, it's all perspective weirdness, and one of a picture of a couple of guys in a band feeding some things to some animals. Or, if you're really up your own ass, a picture of a guy with a fish in front of his face. So, why is it art? Well, a lot of reasons. Not least of which being the continued development of a method of producing pop music that was pioneered long ago by guys like Brian Wilson. Not only that method, but the concept that was birthed out of it, of the pop music auteur. Sure, Pet Sounds was technically a group effort. He doesn't sing in place of any of the other band members, but even the newspapers of the day knew where the brains of the operation really lied. Brian being branded the singular force behind the composition, the arrangements, the production, it worked really well as a selling point and a sort of new avenue to sell a record, but it's also something that holds up pretty damn well to historical analysis and rock criticism mythologizing. The most famous quote from a Beach Boy who is not Brian Wilson, maybe the most famous quote from any Beach Boy that I can remember, Dennis Wilson saying, "Brian is the Beach Boys. He is the band. We're his fucking messengers." Ironically enough, the lyricism on Pet Sounds wasn't something that people could entirely attribute to Brian. But even in a group of 2, the nature of the pop music auteur, and as such the pop music art record, was born in the popular consciousness, or at least it's convenient enough to just say it was Pet Sounds and move on. Authenticity was a concept that, from that point onward, was paramount to producing an artful pop record. The dudes who wrote songs about cruising California for poon at the beach were now writing songs about depression and longing and yearning, much to the chagrin of convicted ladies man Mike Love. Look, if you're watching this, there's a decent chance you know all this shit already. I probably don't have to explain to you who Brian Wilson is. But it stands to reason that this lies at the core of what makes an industry plant so egregious. It's what makes it that instant insult. This is at the core of what makes it just like an affront of a presentation to people who pride themselves on their music taste. Not only is pop music now an art, but the forced introduction of a foreign entity who didn't spend years honing their craft, trying to make their own God only knows, and who in fact might be taking airtime away from somebody who is viewed as this affront to art, particularly to pop music as an art form. But here's the thing. No, it's not. At least not if it's good. As much as hipsters will hem and haw if the smell test is not passed, history has shown that even in genres that pride themselves on their authenticity and realness, that if you're good enough, you'll be etched into history and maybe even like pop music mythology all the same. As soon as executives figured out what one dude did in the 60s, that being that you don't just have to ride on the dashing good looks of one charming young man, but could have four, the Monkees were a thing. That might have been pop music's first lesson, however, that your golden geese might get a little rambunctious if they're not, controlling the production of what they actually put their name on.
Pathetic.
I can't.
It's pitiful.
Shut up.
You shut up.
No, you shut up.
You shut up.
Shut up.
You.
You shut up. You shut up. You.
Okay, I will.
There's, of course, Milford Vanillium, a straight-up invention of a German producer in what was just the most popular and infamous example of a European-centric dance music act being straight-up lip-synced think tank recordings. This trend gets particularly nasty as the 90s roll on into the 2000s, as women with huge, gorgeous singing voices were relegated to the backstage of live shows so that thin, conventionally attractive women, sometimes of completely different races, could just, flail around on stage and lip-sync the song. And let's not forget the OG producers of the industry plant, the factory that has birthed countless pop stars and will own this YouTube channel by the halfway mark of this video, the Great Big Mouse himself. If you thought teeny bopper tunes translating into big-time pop star status started with Sabrina, Olivia, or even Miley, well, you're either my age and don't know, you're younger and don't know, or you're older, and for some reason you're not familiar with the child star histories of numerous pop stars. What are you, some kind of sick weirdo? It may genuinely be news to some of you over the age of 28 that those Sabrina and Olivia whippersnappers that keep making a ruckus on your rectangular anger box came from Disney, but they did. I was there, actually. Put the picture up. I was there. Except it wasn't anything cool. There was Sabrina on the Boy Meets World sequel, appropriately titled Girl Meets World, and Olivia on the sort of desperately trying to stay hip show, from what I remember giving off very try-hard vibes, Bizarrevark, with the internet's favorite fail son, Jake Paul. Yeah, I was 14 and 16 respectively when those shows were on the air. I bet that makes you feel real old, doesn't it, millennials? Yeah, that one's got a sting, am I right? Come on, Grandpa, it's okay. It's okay, let's get you to bed. I mean, I wasn't paying any attention to any of it. I was a boy, I had cool stuff to do. I was listening to ex-military and generally having unrestricted access to the internet that I would pay for dearly, mentally, later on in my life. Plus, don't feel too bad. It'll happen to me too. It'll happen to me just like it happened to Grandpa.
It'll happen to you.
But this isn't a shock by any means, and the notion of calling anyone from Britney Spears to Sabrina Carpenter an industry plant is laughable. Like, yeah, dude, duh. This is where we're going to make another distinction. One that will require another, hopefully brief, probably incorrect, history lesson.
And now, a dramatic reinterpretation of the last 20 years of everybody's life.
Whoa, my phone can go everywhere with me and isn't some gigantic brick anymore? Wow, I can plug my headphones into my phone and play music just like an MP3 player? Dude, my phone doesn't have buttons anymore and can surf the internet? Holy smokes, I can see what literally all of my friends are doing at all times in the day? Jeepers creepers, everything I say, do, or think near a telephone which contains all of my most private banking and personal information is being sapped from me without my knowledge by shady think tanks and corporations for the explicit purpose of influencing my vote in a general election, radicalizing me to hate minorities, to sow doubts about the strength of American democracy, and selling me Crocs? Whoa, I can't plug my fucking headphones into it anymore for some stupid goddamn reason? I guess I could buy a dongle. Fuck you. The personal computer revolution and its consequences made a lot of things possible that feel like institutions now, but are wildly recent in the scheme of American history. We'll skip past the whole my faxes are on the cathode ray tube thing and jump right to my brother circa the late 2010s. My older brother is a virtuoso on guitar, in my opinion. He spent most of his life alive honing his craft. My mother, being a good mother who wants to nurture her kids' creative habits, bought him a pair of headphones from Guitar Center right around the time period I mentioned earlier. That pair of headphones came with a piece of software on a CDR called Cakewalk Sonar, a digital audio workstation, or DAW. After acquiring an interface to plug his microphones directly into his computer, he put out an album. Seriously, a whole fucking album. Yeah, this is commonplace everywhere now. So common that pictures of Focusrites on a desk are the subject of memes informing women to pick all their shit up and run as fast as possible. But in the grander scheme of pop music, this is shockingly new. In the olden days, you could buy a guitar and amp and spend forever honing your craft, or just a couple of power chords and some pickup artist books. But the path forward from there was really cryptic, and today it reads like the stuff of legend. What do you do after that? Well, you could invoke the Sigma Male grind set and play bar shows endlessly until hopefully you'd get noticed. The dream was that one day you'd garner enough buzz where you were playing that an A&R rep from a major label would spot you and see you as their meal ticket. Really dig your stuff, man. And they would pitch you to their bosses. Bada bing, bada boom, you're now a professional musician. Realistic? No, not even fucking close. Certainly more prevalent than it is now. Or at least it feels that way. The image of this represents a more broad turning point away from major labels' tendency to take risks and actually cultivate talent. But it was not a realistic thing for the overwhelming majority of bands in the before time. You know, in 20 BN. Undoubtedly, throughout all of pop music history, it's helped to know a few guys. When people talk about industry plants online, I feel like they have a tendency to over-romanticize this period in pop music history. Not only was it rife with overproduced and manufactured pop stars and rock bands alike, I mean, just ask all the hair metal bands that were demanded to grow their hair out even longer and wear flannel after Kurt Cobain unalived himself, but also getting signed to a major for a lot of reasons could really suck. The late great Steve Albini penned an infamous essay entitled The Problem with Music that goes over a lot of this, or at least his perspective on a lot of it. It could completely screw you. The label could completely screw you economically. They could leave you out in the cold and then just sap up anything they want from all of your labor and efforts. It ends with the line, quote, "Some of your friends are probably already this fucked." Not just economically, but importantly, your reputation could be fucked as well. Dan Ozzi's Sellout is a great read, detailing several bands' experiences transitioning from DIY spaces to major label money, and the wildly varied amounts of success that came from that. Even for bands like Green Day, one of the biggest rock bands on the planet of the 21st century, they were getting shit thrown at them from daring to put pen to paper. Jimmy Eat World had to go through several hoops, and their A&R rep had to go through several hoops to even just have the band get an honest look. Knowing these facts about the way that this was all conducted before the personal computer was a staple of the household, or even, if we want to go more recent, before phones lost a physical keypad, something that's happened in the last half of my life on Earth, it's really easy to see how the declining cost and increased availability of recording equipment that managed to make your song sound even somewhat okay could light this industry on fire. Fuck, I even made music as a late teen and early 20-something. It sucked. Okay, some of it kind of banged. Like 3 songs kind of banged out of like the 100 I made. Mike, play one of the ones that kind of bangs. See, this kind of bangs. I'll never let you hear the ones that suck ass, though. Okay, Mike, play one of the ones that kind of sucks ass. God, this is bad.
God, this sucks.
Shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, Grandpa.
I'm chronologically younger than you.
Now, major labels and streaming executives will be all too happy to use this development to justify the current way that they do things. This way is a prioritization of content from these major labels that is so oversaturated that independent music bafflingly, counterintuitively feels like a relic in the most digitally connected era that humanity has ever fucking lived through, certainly since I've been alive. But it's not the whole story. In my opinion, streaming and new methods of digital distribution have devalued a piece of music so far that it's long past the point of any sort of reliable commercial viability if you're not a legacy act or, a corporation or a major label isn't willing to put a few million behind you to force feed you. This has always existed, but now it appears to be the only option. Indie bands can't tour, indie bands can't make any money off streaming. What other fucking options are there? It's not a statement on the quality of the music from the pop stars or anything like that. It's a statement on the industry, and it's a different, albeit related discussion to what we're talking about here today. No, the reason why I bring this up is because the industry plant of today, as they get called out on TikTok, have to jump through just as many of these hoops. Perhaps, ironically enough, the modern industry plant has put in more legwork than they ever have. When you combine the internet's effect on music distribution with major labels' total fucking allergy to taking a risk, you find that even someone with major label backing is going to have to get thrown to the dogs at some point. You're not getting on TRL without trying anymore. Particularly because that show has not existed in 20 years. That's fair, but also because you're gonna have to just survive TikTok for some of that cash.
So, without an industry in which a label can function as a participant and ship tons of records or, plug a band and get a band on MTV, if it all becomes about PR, it just becomes a really difficult enterprise for musicians. Once things are reduced to that level where it's all about connections and access, and the whole idea of record sales and building an audience and grassroots this and groundswell, once you take all of those options out, it becomes very difficult for a musician to feel like anything other than a chancer, than somebody who's just trying to make it in the sense of being talked about on the same plane as, Grizzly Bear or Grimes or whatever. It becomes about reputation and renown. It doesn't become about you as a musician and your music. You're not taking the band out on the road and fighting the good fight and trying to build an audience on your own terms. It's almost impossible to do this these days.
This is where I want to make my distinction. What we have here with Lawrence and many acts like them is an amateur industry plant. An oxymoron, I know. But we can differ here from a professional industry plant in a couple of different ways. I want you to be sitting down for this. Are you sitting? A lot of the acts you like are probably industry plants. I know. But as we've come to understand them, and as the internet has branded them, they're industry plants. The reason why you probably don't know or just straight up don't care about this is because they're professional industry plants. They've gone through the process that in 2025, with acts like Lawrence and stuff, seems weirdly kind of rare. These conversations have already been beaten into the ground by a lot of people. You just might not have seen them or heard about them. Here's a list of acts that have had this allegation brought against them notably on the internet. Phoebe Bridgers has been called this numerous times and has hit back against it very hard in the press. She's brought up the point that obviously money is going to play a part in an artist's come up, in particular highlighting The Strokes, one of the OG industry plant discussions on the internet that I can remember. The lead singer, Julian Casablancas' dad, was the founder of a modeling agency. I remember a lot of conversations about Chance the Rapper when it came to this, after the sort of rapid rise of mixtapes like Acid Rap.
Calero was a big discussion as well around this time, with people looking into links of her dad working in marketing. Billie Eilish, around when, Bad Guy popped off, this conversation was everywhere. Mom's an actress, grew up in LA, everything like that. I'm not above scouring Wikipedia for some of these. Apparently there's a guy named Rory who was one of the first notable discussions on the internet. I bring him up particularly not because I know anything about it, but because this allegation is thrown out against like 99% of all double XL freshmen. Post Malone's White Iverson, racked up a bunch of streams on SoundCloud. Just like that, he was signed to Republic Records. King Princess, I looked this up. Great-grandfather owned Macy's. It's such a weird pull. Chaperone was previously signed to a major label, attracted record label interest from the age of 16 or so, as did Lana Del Rey, who was involved in the music industry before video games ever blew up. There's too many to count. You'll notice a lot of pretty ugly tendencies amongst these conversations to just outright justify misogyny in a way that, has a very Gamergate stink to it. Actually, it's about authenticity in pop music. Every artist I just listed, mostly at least, has transcended past this initial industry plant labeling and just become institutions of the pop music world. This is where I make the distinction. Are you technically correct by the internet's vibe-based definition of an industry plant to throw that label onto Disney product Olivia Rodrigo or young Nashville development contract holder Taylor Swift? Yeah. But who fucking cares? No, the internet's ire is truly felt for the amateur industry plant. This is a type of artist that has, yes, achieved an inordinate amount of fame and popularity, as any amount of fame or popularity as an independent artist is inordinate. But also, they have not crossed into the threshold of pop star. This is the archetype that is ripe for ridicule and resentment on the annals of the internet. These are typically music industry lifers, who, in my opinion, are faced with a world that has changed so much, even in the last few years, that major labels, or whoever has promulgated their rise, their appearance on my phone screen, can't even be allowed or be fucked to do their job of promoting their artist properly. They can't even astroturf them. They're out to dry on the TikToks of the world with far less cushion than was afforded to people in their position 10 years ago. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about. Everything I can ascertain about the band Lawrence is, in my view, the textbook amateur industry plant story. In the What You Want acoustic-ish video that got big, you can count at least 10 session musicians, most of them backup singers, a grand piano, several expensive-looking vocal mics, strings, a MIDI controller, an electric piano, a giant mixing board, and all of this is taking place in a studio that most independent musicians are not even going to be able to dream about spending a day in, or even a few hours, for the cost it surely demanded. The brother and sister are obviously music lifers in a way that I just have to respect. Money or not, their bios are quick to state that they've been playing music since they were toddlers. Their Wikipedia page as well, seemingly unavoidably, must mention that their father is a man named Mark Lawrence. It's a name that I don't think most people will pull off the top of their head, but he was, in fact, the director of Miss Congeniality, which did, in fact, gross about $213 million at the box office. There's a pseudoscience of industry plant hunting on Wikipedia that occurs not only with music industry plants, but suspected nepo babies of any industry. It's given birth to the meme of the parent's blue name on Wikipedia. It's easy collective shorthand for look at that guy, they started with a leg up. But again, I don't think it's as simple as painting these guys of solely some kind of silver spoon industry type no talents. I mean, the brother of the duo, Clyde Lawrence, even went to Capitol Hill to testify about the music industry. He's clearly got some stuff going on under the hood. Here, let's see what he was talking about.
Why is it that all of Live Nation's costs get recouped before the show hits its profit point, yet ours, the artists, don't? Why is there so little transparency as to what line items such as facility fees actually go towards? Why is it standard for Live Nation to take a 20% commission on our merchandise sales while we never receive a cent of their ancillary revenues like concessions, alcohol, and parking? Finally, why is Live Nation allowed to freely set exorbitantly high ticket fees without any transparency or input, while in other industries the government has mandated caps on various types of junk fees?
I take back everything negative I've ever said about this band. In this house, we stan Lawrence. No, it's just further proof here about what I'm saying. The industry plants of yesteryear, even someone who appears to have grown up affluently and given numerous advantages from birth that indie musicians will never obtain, is still forced to interface from the ground up with a music industry that refuses to economically or artistically nurture them. The party line is that there's simply so much music that it's hard to sift through it all, which is exactly why you don't give a shit about AI slop on your platforms, right? It's exactly why streaming is as meritorious as it's ever been, right? It's exactly why independent musicians make as much per stream in royalties as major label signees, right? For better or worse, we're going off vibes here. And the vibes of Plant with Lawrence are still hard to shake. These guys have John Bellion in their introductory docu-series, a comically large name to include in such a thing. It's almost like beat for beat, pop star never stop, never stopping. It doesn't get any better from another cursory look at the band's official material, even an attemptedly sympathetic glance. That first episode of the docuseries is entitled Meet Lawrence, the ultimate DIY touring band. This ultimate DIY group throws the note of a John Bellion interview into the description, seemingly as an aside.
Since Clyde was literally a baby, he was a musical genius. Like, he was playing drums and keys before he could even speak English. He was even writing music professionally since he was, I think, like a 4-year-old.
And Gracie was just born to be a performer. From the second that she could do anything, even stand up, she was just the star of the show, whether that was performing a song or a comedy routine or an acting bit at home for our parents and our grandparents, or even on Broadway. She was on Broadway as a kid.
Almost all pop musicians come from one extreme or the other, poverty or wealth. They're almost never middle-class, working-class people that just kind of jumped ship and made it. They either have so little and so little to lose that they can continue to pursue this thing way beyond someone who would lose their job, you know, if they were out touring for 3 months. Or they're so fucking rich that basically they're just doing whatever they want.
Later, we just started picking up more bandmates. We met our drummer when Clyde was in middle school, and then Clyde went off to college, and he met all the other members of our band.
We were playing tons of college parties all around the Northeast, building a following. We played this really kind of soulful, funky brand of pop music.
And they're becoming famous because they can keep doing it, because they can afford to keep doing it in a somewhat justified way. For that reason, people are often suspicious of rich rock stars because you already had it. It was so easy for you. You don't have to do anything.
Once I graduated college and Gracie graduated high school, we just dove in. We started releasing music and we hit the road and started touring the country over and over with this same group of 8 people. And slowly but surely, people seemed to like the music and people liked the live show. And before we knew it, we had amassed a really solidly sized fan base around the whole country.
You know, of course you went out and wrote some great pop music and wrote some great pop songs. You're rich. What the fuck else are you going to do? Buy shit? You know, you can just be creative all the time because you're loaded. Wish I was.
More than anything, Lawrence speaks to me in that way of the amateur industry plan. These are talented musicians that are getting absolutely lacerated on social media for the traditional ways that music enthusiasts see industry plants in a music industry currently that sprays anyone who isn't at the top with fucking weed killer. Yes, all of the main criticisms levied against them artistically are valid. They'd be valid to the kids using music as a piece of identity and expression. Or more appropriately, I think they're appropriate of someone who would be doing that in a pre-streaming environment. But even after all of that, we still have to grasp with the fact that once this band began to enter the world of modern music enthusiasts in the way that they did through their phones on TikTok, the overwhelming majority of people had no idea who they were. As we've come to know the industry plan, this shouldn't be possible, at least for very long, right? We're still so caught up in old ways of thinking about authenticity in pop music that we're being willfully ignorant to the fact that, as a system, the traditional major label service to artists to promote and distribute them is essentially non-existent. This is due to a number of things, and like I said previously, I don't want to discount the real impact that technological advancement and declining costs of music production equipment have had on this, but it still doesn't help that these major labels, tied at the hip to all of these big streamers, have seemingly just not adapted this mindset at all for a post-streaming world. Yes, these advancements make a lot of record industry jobs harder, but also, thanks to agreements and ownership stakes, major labels have one of the most disproportionate shares of influence that they have ever had. Ever. When you combine that with the poor, sick economic state of most independent and formerly independent venues, you get a system of places to play shows owned by Live Nation, streaming services who are contractually mandated to pay out the highest rates for royalties to 3 companies, and in general, a music industry landscape that is so inhospitable to anybody who is not a famous artist that guys like Clyde Lawrence, rightfully arguing against the monopolization of live music, are forced to be in that position from a place of economic advantage that would have previously at least given you a way better shot at a period of sustained success. When our industry plants are failing, I think we might just have a dead forest. Welcome to the music industry. No, the actual main thing that struck me from listening to What You Want was that this sounded like a group of economically privileged but talented musicians who, much like myself, just really liked Vulfpeck. You know, I had almost forgotten, but this whole thing started off as a review of Clarity of Cow. It's good. It's like 7.7 out of 10. Kind of peters off a little bit at the end there, but the closer is it's a good song. It's a really nice progression of a lot of their more, classic pop song pastiches like Birds of a Feather and Running Away, and it just maximizes the appeal of that stuff. It's a really fun listen, just like anything else from Vulfpeck. I know who I'm going to talk about, and I actually have to go stand up and take a walk briefly, I think. This idea of an amateur industry plant is one unique to this particular post-social media moment in time that we live in. This is all the byproduct of an unimaginably large, multifaceted, weaving web of technological advancement, societal isolation, and corporate consolidation. It's a unique time in the world, and one idea that has long been observed since social media or whatever is that an influencer occupies a lot of the same spaces as a traditional celebrity, but the perceived lack of a barrier between you and the influencer is one that gets exploited all the time. This can be exploited physically. If you're really lucky, if you're an influencer, you can essentially pay the price of a reduced boundary in exchange for some sums of money. If you're the luckiest of the lucky, you're just receiving money for a reduced physical boundary between you and whoever's watching you. As such, you get teenagers with no concept of real-life consequences who have only spent their time online, maybe being radicalized to some political ideology, putting you in real, mortal, real-life danger with shit like swatting. But this boundary can also be an ideological one, and that ideological boundary can get exploited just as well. The modern influencer with either a grassroots fan base or an imperceptibly astroturfed fan base is a more lucrative product than you could ever imagine. Enter Oliver Anthony, whose 2023 song Rich Men North of Richmond was the only thing anyone could talk about for like a week after it came out. To talk about the song is honestly more interesting in current year. I at least find it more interesting than talking about the societal mechanisms that exploited its rise to further propagandize a set of large companies' CEOs' political ideologies. That's boring. Me and you live through that shit every day, and it's hell. The song is at least somewhat interesting on face. It's a country song that, more than anything, I believe caught people's attention instinctively because it sounds like a traditional country song. It's descriptive. There's no programmed trap drums. There's no lists of country music buzzword nouns. I mean, fuck, it doesn't even mention a dirt road or a Chevrolet. I think this was the reason it was immediately and more organically something people paid attention to. Jason Aldean can try whatever the fuck he wants in a small town, but the forces that drove that song to occupying the same spaces that this song did are all importantly, unavoidably intertwined with the forces that make songs like Try That in a Small Town big to begin with. It sounds like a product of a rich Nashville or LA studio, with a couple of guys paid a lot of money to feed the country music radio audience exactly what they're told that they want. Big, cock rock guitars, lavish music videos, and the same beaten to death lyrical tropes of modern country radio. Small towns, good old boys, dirt roads. It might be a bit more explicitly political than your average huge produced conglomerate country music song, but only barely anymore. Its moment in the political zeitgeist was largely the force-feeding of the corporate, immensely wealthy conservative news media. Rich Men North of Richmond appears way different at first. Again, the instrumentation is sparse and unassuming. The vocalist here, Oliver Anthony, doesn't do the same poop-smelling mean mug of Jason Aldean, and doesn't have the same implacable, just ungodly, boring modern country music voice. It's got some twang, and from its opening lines you might even be tricked into thinking it has soul. It might be authentic. This guy's not industry. Not at all. For God's sake, the title and a lot of the lyrics appear to take aim at the wealthy, the boss man, keeping the working man down. A theme pretty common in old country and folk music that's become legendary. Then, you get to the Wham line.
God, if you're 3'5" and you're 3 pounds, taxes.
There's the clip that would get Oliver Anthony his moment of amateur industry plant notoriety. Just a superficially different version of becoming that week's TikTok punching bag. Just instead of TikTok punching you, Fox News is using you to punch someone else. Usually poor people.
Obviously resonated. I mean, I've seen songs go viral, but that's pretty bananas, son. Your shit went to the moon right away. And God, I'm not sure who sent it to me. I'll have to find out who sent it to me. Because it's one of those things where, like, once one person sent it to me, then it was like dozens of people were sending it to me.
Songwriter Oliver Anthony has gone virtually unknown to a household name after surprise chart topper Rich Men North of Richmond, detailing the struggles of working class America.
Fox News correspondent Griff Jenkins caught up with him exclusively over the weekend at a concert in North Carolina. Griff, tell us what you found.
Let's be clear here. I want to state the patently obvious. No one on God's green earth would know who the fuck this guy is without that line in the song. Simple as that. It was the fodder for endless think pieces and pseudo-discussions for weeks on end following the song's decided value on news broadcasts and reaction channels. I'm very comfortable calling Anthony an amateur industry plant. A true blue amateur, maybe, in ways that acts like Lawrence aren't, sure. In fact, a lot of Anthony's themes of economic inequality are just running in polar opposite directions of what we view an industry plant as. But the fact of the matter is that even if he was sprouting up a little more on his own, he was dug up and planted all the fucking same. It's been 2 years, and the guy has not even sniffed a modicum of the success that lower-tier country music industry lifers get. It's no shock at all that as soon as Anthony attempted to move on from the song, insisting in interviews as rather a, savvy sort of music industry-minded type person that he's both got more songs and that his politics don't just prescribe and bend to any one popular worldview, that he was fucking dropped like a stone from this new microeconomy of conservative pandering internet music.
It's funny because originally that song wasn't really even in my top 5. Like, it's not normally the type of song. I've written songs with similar messages, but as far as that sort of, like, I guess anthem format is what people are calling it. It's like an anthem. Like, that's not something I would normally write.
Feeling pretty good, and really all of them, they just talk about common struggles that I feel like everybody deals with. I mean, it's really just how I felt, and so I guess other people inherently feel that way. Now that I'm learning, I'm not the only one that felt that way, but I really just wrote the song for me.
I started uploading a couple songs, and Ain't Got a Dollar, I uploaded spring of last year, and then Rich Man's Gold, Cobwebs and Cocaine, and the list goes on from there. And there's probably been about a dozen or so originals that I've put out just off my cell phone. And I'll say this, I sit pretty dead center down the aisle on politics, and always have. Both sides serve the same master, and that master is not someone of any good to the people of this country.
If you say shit like that, the money is going to stop rolling in from those that are wetting their shorts or bankrolling the likes of Aaron Lewis, Tom McDonald, and Rob Ritchie. The source of Anthony's come up is obscure, perhaps intentionally. The channel it was posted on is one of an organization called Radio WV. It proclaims a very pseudo-earthy, down-home type of authenticity in their presentation and mission statement, but that leads to natural questions about their connections that allow them to do things like hold large festivals, do PR, and enter legal battles over a song. That stuff all costs money. A lot of it, actually. Where's it coming from?
And then Draven from Radio WV, he hit me up on like a Thursday and was really interested in doing some stuff. And at the time, I only had the first half of Richmond North of Richmond written. I posted it online, but it was just like that first half. So we threw the second half together the day of filming.
Gotta be coming from somewhere. Simple as this. You put a lyric in your song that resembles a beaten into the ground talking point by the 1% to justify cutting social programs, and then, when you can't guarantee them a continued stream of propaganda, they're going to fucking drop you. This plant was hit with the deluxe speed grow and axed as soon as it stopped producing fruit. I want to feel bad looking at an amateur industry plant who, by all accounts, is just looking to keep playing music professionally, as all of these people are. But it's hard when seeing the explicitly political gain exploited by this unique, ugly problem on the side of the modern music industry. Normally, discussions about this sort of thing are limited to the monetary advantages and networking advantages afforded from birth to musicians who we perceive as not having earned it. Ironically, the song that even resembles some of those things in its lyrics, some of those ideas, was not only always going to field questions about the exact same thing, but lended itself perfectly to this manufactured political platforming that can't even bother to pretend to be organic anymore. The closest thing that we have got on this list to a grassroots hit was forwarded directly to Fox and Friends. Give me a fucking break. We've landed on two acts that, in my opinion, represent the differences between the professional and the amateur industry plant pretty perfectly. One of them is the most by-the-books backstory of an industry plant that you'll see spread along the internet. One of them is a now-defunct TikTok punching bag. One has opened for AJR, Pink, My Chemical Romance, and Taylor Swift on the goddamn Eras tour. And the biggest claim to fame of the other one is a slew of social media takedowns and a hate-watched small repertoire of YouTube music videos that max out at about 1 million views. Let's think of that for a second. 1 million views. This video is gonna languish at a couple tens of views for a while, and I'm cool with that. I've made peace with it. Participating in social media content creation and putting myself out there is a cosmically horrifying proposition. But for someone in my shoes, or the shoes of especially an aspiring musician who's attempting to make a career out of something, 1 million views is a fucking million views. That's an amount that you can only dream of. It's an amount that could genuinely change your life. And yet, nothing. End date on Wikipedia. Gone. Dust in the wind. I bet you haven't even thought about the tramp stamps in years if you ever knew who they were. Gayle started out in the mold of an old type industry plant, and the story can't really even be painted like any other way. She moved to Nashville when she was a child to attempt to become a professional singer, and was signed to Atlantic Records before she could even buy a beer. By a measly 17 years old, her biggest song, and to date her only song that has been a matter of importance, breaking beyond the eternal wall of the social media feed, was just about everywhere. I worked retail during this time, and it played on loop every few hours or so. It also is not good. It's not good at all. It's sophomoric and stale. It is a car commercial song wearing the skin of alternative culture with a husk of nothing underneath. All incredibly mean things to say about a literal child's first popular song, right? I mean, yes, but this is pop music. This is art, right? I don't think it's the role of art criticism to just be nice to something because a kid made it. Nobody said the same shit about Hanson, and there's not really a huge jump between singing the first few letters of the alphabet and singing bop bop ba doo wop. Sure, it's less of a good look to be unabashedly mean to something a kid made in 2025. But it's still a kid with the financial backing of one of the biggest fucking labels to ever exist. It got a Grammy nomination for Song of the fucking Year. I don't blame Gayle for it sucking. And being an artist is hard. It's insanely hard. I couldn't cut it. She'll always have my respect for ever having skin in the game. It does not absolve that song, however, which sucks eggs. Number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Let's head to AA Ball now, and I'm sorry, but I'm gonna borrow some content from Anthony Fantony here, as he covered this band pretty thoroughly right around their moment, and in the era of the modern internet, I view him as about a reliable secondary source as there could be. Tramp Stamps were a band that rapidly gained people's attention through, ironically enough, one of the most organic ways an artist can in 2025, or at least as close to organic as you can get. In my opinion, they utilized TikTok's sort of open secret daily content mill algorithm farming and just fucking pumped out video after video, increasing the odds that one of them would take off. It's a move frequently utilized on all social media platforms by independent artists who watch the way that others attain success. I was there, and anecdotally I can say that there was a lot of immediate dissatisfaction for this group of 3 women in dyed hair doing pop-punk covers. Lead vocalist Marissa Mano would frequently strain her voice as though she was trying to do a Tom DeLonge impression, and combined with the sort of aren't the kids gonna be into this like quirkiness, the theatrics of doing videos in a bathroom or something, there may have never been an easier target to brand for an incoming internet hellstorm. This is only one half of the equation, but it's crucial to mention. Just like Gayle, but far more explicitly, Tramp Stamps were really looking to hammer home and image them as edgy, alternative, emo, pop-punk kind of kids. They were just trying to sell an image of them making rebellious music because it was their passion. This is something to be careful with. It's not until decades and decades after the fact that the most mainstream of alternative music can even begin to get somewhat reappraised by the now fully grown alternative kids. And even then, in my experience, it has to be the most popular stuff to ever exist. If you can think of a band from the 2000s that they're attempting to at least channel the fans of that was popular, they were called fake emo. They just were. My Chemical Romance, Blink-182, these bands are inseparable from the general populace's understanding of emo as we know it today. But the guiding wisdom for the solid, first 15 years of internet discussion about these bands was that they were teeny bopper shit for babies. No one's ever coming around on Simple Plan, and I'm not seeing many music critic types stand shoulder to shoulder with me that Sum 41's We're All to Blame is a banger, but we can at least all pretty much agree that In Too Deep goes pretty hard. Only problem is, for types like me, it took about 20 years. There was a through line through a lot of the amateur and more professional industry plants farming around this time for an actively sought after and still economically lucrative fan base of alternative kids. The problem was they were just completely at a fucking loss for how to write music that actually respected them. I picture some dudes in a boardroom with mustard stains on their ties, just looking at how much good for you was a success and approaching it like a fucking algebra problem. And so, how do we capitalize on that? Well, you get A, B, C, D, E, F, U, and you get the tramp stamps, and you get Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Bitch.
Twinkle, twinkle, little bitch, just another narcissist. Hate your guts, you make me sick. I'm so fucking over it.
I started calling it nursery rhyme emo while pissing and working my retail job and hearing it over the fucking loudspeaker in the bathroom. It wants to appear edgy and cool, even using freaking swear words. I mean, I guess like I just did. But it's so brain rotted, infantilizing, and pandering. It just reeks of corporate thinking. You don't get an Olivia without Hayley Williams, and you can take one peek at even the shit Paramore did when she was not too far from Olivia Rodrigo's age, and just trace back the very source of this problem. Jesus, I mean, look at Olivia. Those records are not pandering. They have a ton of conscious choices to utilize youth as a vehicle for angst, because being young sucks. No one takes you seriously. Least of all, the major label is trying to market to you with literal children's songs. Somehow, we started at references to Refused and ended up at fucking Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. In general, this entire, thankfully brief moment in the pop music zeitgeist was just willfully ignorant of all that came before it.
You're doing some clip testing your emo and your punk cred, and MCR comes on and your brain starts buffering?
Again, that's only one half of it. Sure, Gayle's come up was pegged with tons of industry plant complaints, but the amateur industry plant, Tramp stamps, perhaps pierce the veil a bit too far. Again, ironically enough, showing a pretty authentic piece of themselves, but unwittingly flexing on countless indie rock musicians with their pre-established but hard-earned cred in the industry, in what is known in independent music circles as a bad look and what is known in alternative rock circles as fucking selling out.
New Music Friday on Spotify. Like, how is this seemingly independent band just doing it totally on their own, getting on New Music Friday after just like putting out a few singles?
Oh, that's how you start a pop punk band? Just get a couple music industry lifers and then just get on New Music Friday? I thought you had to be learning power chords for years and having weird experiences with romantic partners. I thought you had to play a bunch of basement shows for months on end, years on end, that are only attended by the other bands on the bill. I thought you had to deal with shitty local concert promoters who want you to sell your own tickets. I thought you had to relentlessly spam your own music on Instagram, much in the way you did on TikTok, for the vain hope of maybe one day, someday, getting a 10:30 a.m. slot on an emo nostalgia festival. But apparently, you can just get on New Music Friday. Why hasn't everybody tried this? Sorry, I'm really trying to keep from getting salty. I respect these women and the genuinely impressive work that they've done, because making money from music is like almost impossible. The money they did make in the business, it was very corporate. And here's where the other half of the argument comes in. The universal part that gets stamped onto the industry plants on trial. The drummer was known to write songs for commercials for the likes of DirecTV, MTV, and the NFL. The other two members inked publishing deals with notorious producer and absolutely abhorrent vibes merchant, which is all I'm going to say in this video for fears that it might ever take off, Dr. Luke. The music, you'll be shocked to hear, isn't very good. Their signature tune for my money, I'd Rather Die, is a mess from the jump, with the wackily titled EP, We Got Drunk and Made an EP in all caps, seemingly from a label entitled Make Tampons Free.
Please clap.
It's not like it's even an egregious or particularly notable failure in the way something like MGK's Emo Girl was, but it's entirely unremarkable in just about every single way as a song. It's a big nothing burger. It's aided in its nothingness by a set of lyrics that really wants to be edgy and alternative but ends up just kind of sounding like the works of a Twitter troll. It's guaranteed clicks the song. The production is pretty gutless, and there's this whole thing is just really basic as a song, as a production. But it's not a train wreck in the way some of the other same songs of this ilk are, which honestly maybe be a bad thing, because a lot of these clicks from these songs just came from pure infamy. Speaking of trolls, long ago on the internet there used to be a pretty golden rule to follow, which is don't feed them. Well, they did, and that was the last moment that we heard from Tramp Stamps. As a band, at least, I should say.
Hi, fuckers. Tramp Stamps here. You know, true to their brand. Hey, fuckers. Get ready, fuckers. The misinformation and lies that feed this cancel culture are so fucking toxic. Now, it's, man, you know it's going to be some bullshit when it like the first words that come out of the gate are cancel culture. You know it's going to be some bullshit. We are three women who have been writing and producing music for many years, busting our asses in the music business and building our personal career.
Again, I have to be somewhat thankful here. Tramp Stamps pulled back the curtain a lot.
We decided not to sign to a major label. I wonder what label was offering. I wonder what label was trying to land them. Anyway, going through, we made our own label called Make Tampons Free, which is so radical, which is like so, God, it's so based and tampon pilled, TBH, which is distributed through AWOL, which literally stands for Artists Without a Label. We own Make Tampons Free, no one else, so fuck off on all of that. Caro and Marissa are both signed to RX Songs. RX Songs is a publishing company, not a label. Publishing companies sign writers and producers and give them in advance so they can live and help set up sessions / get songs placed with other artists / TV shows, etc. Paige is signed as a writer and producer to Downtown Music Publishing and Pray for My Haters Publishing, which is not her own artist. Not her own artist development company. LOL, that was funny though.
They were not successful. They were not pop stars. They did not have longevity as a group. Simply and plainly put, the level of engagement was not there. Again, 1 million views is a ton to you or me. In 2025, it's not enough to sustain a career. In this retaliation, it almost reads like a resume. A Finn McKenty style gambit, where as soon as you just kind of get fed up with the whole thing, you don't want to engage with people looking to maintain some kind of cultural importance to the art that you're leeching off of and trying to sell. You just try to sell yourself. They just straight up admit it. We're distributed through AWOL. AWOL is a massive to-do. Not only are some of my favorite acts ever on AWOL, and again, I really want to stress that this is not a statement on quality, it's just like the names on AWOL's roster. Everything, JPEG Mafia, big recent names like Joe, Lil Peep, Girl in Red, industry stalwarts like Tom York, there's Steve Lacy. I mean, look, AWOL sells itself very first and foremost as being a different kind of label, not really a label, kind of a publisher. They afford artists a lot of independence. That's fucking great. You still don't sign any of those names without a ton of money to throw around. They also flex some music industry experience. In the space of this, just straight up admitting that they're industry, that they've worked in the music industry for a while in a very sort of corporate sense. Not a thing to be dogged. Again, making money from music, basically impossible. It is one of the most ridiculously hard processes you and I could ever attempt to do. Whether that be for a commercial jingle, or whether that be for post-punk. But crucially, even a story like this, where people in sane mind can congratulate and recognize the real effort it took to get to a place like that, you're bringing this to spaces that are supposed to be edgy and alternative. You ever think about the word alternative and what it's meant in that context? When you do that in these spaces, really in any independent music space, but particularly in more aggressive genres, you're going to be scrutinized, and you're going to have to pass a smell test. You're going to have to pass through a gate that's being kept, not by one person, but by a subculture. Gatekeeping, elitism, these are all things that are really reviled in the post-Poptimism world, but they're also necessary pieces for subculture to flourish. The setting of boundaries, the setting of rules of who is or isn't a part of this subculture, it's paramount to them even existing at all. By nature, it is elitist. It is exclusionary. It's also a key building block to having a community based around a certain type of art, an enthusiasm around art. Drawing those lines and arguing over the boundaries of those lines, the real argument and discussion about it, of genre, for as many think pieces and artist statements that, for valid reasons, say, hey, this is a dumb exercise we all do. True, but it's also an exercise that has kept people engaged in discussion about art that isn't just the most mass market stuff ever to be produced for decades. To sum up the whole legacy of the Tramp stamps, and I'll play one clip.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
It's the end of the main script. This was supposed to be a fucking 500 word review. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? Part of the reason I wanted to make this video was to poke some fun at the self-seriousness of those that label other artists industry plants. And then thinking about it in a really sort of platonic sense, and thinking about my ideals when it comes to the things I find important in culture and discussion around pop music, I realized that, again, in its platonic sense, it's a kind of admirable thing. I really do mean that, hypothetically and platonically, because in real life, pointing at somebody and going industry plant is, at worst, a vehicle for discrimination, whether it be motivated by gender or race. It's a vehicle for hatred, and at best can be a misguided understanding of the always existent machinations for how to get big as an artist. In the grand scheme of pop music and pop stars, those that have achieved that level coming from truly nothing are few and far between. And if they did come from nothing, then they got something pretty quick. And people with something who wanted to make a lot of money off them and have them get popular. But again, if something as pure and good as art wants to make us form a community and bond over it, what stronger way is there to bond than identifying a common enemy? Again, it's great so long as that enemy is actually an enemy, so long as it's somewhat nefarious. I don't feel remorse watching Megan Fox's rich husband LARP as an emo kid and pointing and laughing. I can do that, and a great thing is I can share in that schadenfreude with you. We can both get joy from it. We both probably grew up listening to similar, if not the same, more obscure bands that were doing it because they were genuinely emotional. Watching a multimillionaire do it as cosplay is something we can enjoy mocking together. But as always on the internet, there's the potential to take it too far. The phrase industry plant is used with jarring regularity, as I said before, to justify misogyny, and reinforces tired, stale, really obviously incorrect narratives that because somebody has money or fame, that they can't be mentally ill, depressed, or even, in a positive light, more artistically driven. It's just not true. You can have conversations about art's validity. You certainly can have conversation about wealth's validity. Having a conversation about a person's validity is really shitty. It's part of a common discussion I see come up a lot amongst people who follow similar Poptimism debates, like I mentioned earlier. Is it wrong to be a hater? The social media era, in appearance and many times in practice, has removed the impenetrable wall of celebrity. Feedback is instantaneous and needlessly vitriolic. But I think it's important that if we want to keep the idea of subcultures alive, that we're not afraid to critique art and be honest about it. It doesn't shock me that in this era, someone like Kanye can essentially just move however he wants, knowing there will be a legion of Twitter bots ready to skin someone alive over his shitty AI-generated slop music. Those guys are engaging in subculture. It's just the most evil and shitty, childish subcultures to exist in human history. Attack art, attack corporate art, just don't attack artists. Form your own tastes and opinions. Try to find music that you can really use as a barometer for the things you value. It doesn't have to be one-to-one, this thing says something I agree with, but the notion of artistic pursuits, the little intricacies that an artist can take in producing something that connects with you, these are all things that I love and want to reinforce as important in just about everything I do. Art, with music certainly being no exception, is such a wondrous thing to make a piece of yourself. It's better than so many other things you could make a piece of yourself. When you give yourself wholly, entirely, truly to a piece of art and it clicks with you, that is a feeling unmatched by anything on earth. It will change your life in ways that you will be grappling with decades down the line. And those experiences will remain some of the ones you look back on with the most love of any of them that you can remember. And it doesn't come from putting someone else down. It doesn't come from winning an argument. It comes from expanding your worldview. It comes from emotional release. It comes from feeling identified, feeling seen, feeling validated, feeling challenged, feeling just a world of emotions. Because, once again, if you find community in it, one of the best feelings on earth. To share your love of something that changed your life with someone else, it's one of the premier experiences of being a human being. If you find enough of these people, it's honestly a genuinely pretty good barometer for how fulfilled you could be in life, to me. And when bad actors look to take that thing that is so special to you and poison it, monetarily exploit it, ideologically exploit it, or as seems to be the case so often nowadays, devalue it and invalidate it, tell them to fuck off. Alright, that's pretty much it.